The first thing I remember is the sound. Not music, not voices, but waves. Slow, deep breaths rolling onto the shore as if the ocean itself was alive and speaking to me. I stood barefoot at the edge of the water, the tide creeping up to my ankles, the sand warm even though the sun had just begun to rise. My sandals dangled from my fingers, and the salty wind lifted strands of my hair, carrying them across my face. I am Alina Morozova, 33 years old, born and raised in St. Petersburg, a pianist, a performer, someone who spent years under bright stage lights and in front of polite applause. But in that moment, staring out at the Philippine Sea, I was not the woman who had left Russia. I was someone I was still becoming. I came to the Philippines for the sun. I stayed because the ocean had other plans. Back home, my life was rehearsals, winter coats, and silent dinners in my apartment. The city was beautiful, but my days had become a loop. Perform, buo, go home, repeat. That winter was brutal. Snow piled against my windows, the heating in my building failed twice, and one evening I sat in my kitchen wearing gloves, staring at my piano. I felt like I had been holding my breath for years. A friend had once told me, half joking, half serious, "Alina, you need the sun. Go somewhere warm before you turn into ice." The next morning, without thinking too much, I booked a flight to Palawan. 2 weeks. That was the plan. The moment I stepped out of the airport in Puerto Princesa, the heat wrapped around me like a living thing. The air smelled of grilled fish, coconut oil, and something sweet I couldn't name. Tricycles rattled past, their roofs painted in bright colors. Vendors shouted in a language I didn't understand, holding out skewers of meat and baskets of mangoes. My suitcase felt absurd here, like a piece of winter in a place that didn't know the word. I took a van to El Nido. My guest house was a few steps from the beach, with white curtains that swayed in the wind and a hammock tied between palm trees. That night, I fell asleep to the sound of waves instead of the hum of my radiator. On my second day, I was exploring when the sky suddenly darkened. Within minutes, rain fell so hard it blurred the world. I ducked into a tiny cafe painted bright blue, with mismatched chairs and an old radio playing songs I couldn't understand. Behind the counter was a man with warm brown eyes and a quiet smile. "From where?" he asked. "Russia. Very far, very cold," I replied. He laughed. "Welcome to the opposite of that." We talked as the rain beat against the tin roof. His name was Miguel, and he told me about fishing with his father, about typhoons, about the moods of the sea. I told him about snowstorms, about music, about how sometimes the silence after a performance felt heavier than the performance itself. When the rain stopped, Miguel said, "Tomorrow, I'll show you the real Palawan." The next morning, I climbed onto the back of his motorbike. We rode past rice fields that shimmered like glass under the sun, past children who waved and shouted hello, through paths shaded by coconut palms. He took me to hidden lagoons where the water was green like glass. In a fishing village, an elderly woman pressed a ripe mango into my hands. Miguel translated, "For you." That night, we sat on the sand as fishing boats returned, their lanterns glowing like fallen stars on the water. For the first time in years, I didn't think about tomorrow. My return flight came too soon. At the airport, my heart felt heavy. It wasn't love yet, not exactly, but I wasn't ready to leave. I pushed my ticket a month forward, then another. Eventually, I stopped checking flights at all. I began giving piano lessons to children at the community hall. The piano was out of tune and some keys stuck, but the children's laughter filled the room with music no perfection could match. Every day taught me something. How to eat with my hands, how to dance at fiestas without worrying about steps, how to watch a sunset without trying to capture it on a screen. I saw how people here could laugh even when things were hard. Miguel became my guide, my translator, my friend. When I stumbled over Tagalog words, he was patient. When I missed home, he reminded me that I could carry home inside me. One afternoon, a typhoon warning came. The wind howled, coconut trees bent, and the sea turned black. I stayed with Miguel's family in their sturdy concrete house. We lit candles, shared warm food, and whispered jokes to keep the children from crying. When morning came, the streets were scattered with debris, some roofs gone, fishing boats broken. Miguel looked at me and said, "The sea gives and the sea takes, but we rebuild. Always." I carried those words with me. What grew between us wasn't a sudden fire. It was a tide, quiet, steady, always returning. He never brought roses, But he brought me coffee in the mornings, fixed the leak in my roof, and drove an hour just to bring me bread I liked. One night, sitting on the shore, he asked, "Will you go back?" I thought for a long time. If I go back, I'll miss this. The warmth, the people, the sea at night, and you. A year passed before I noticed. I had opened a small music school in town. Our first recital was on the beach, with strings of lights and the ocean as our backdrop. When I played my own piece, a mix of Russian melancholy and Filipino joy, the applause felt different, warmer, real. Miguel was at the back, smiling as if he had known all along I would stay. Sometimes we think we choose the places we go, but sometimes the places choose us. They take our old stories, smooth their edges, and give us new ones. The Philippines wasn't just a holiday, it was where I found my rhythm again. Where I learned that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it's already beside you, waiting for you to notice. It was during the town fiesta. Music filled the streets, roasted lechon spun over open fires, and people danced in circles. Everyone laughed easily, slipping in and out of Tagalog and the local dialect. I stood there smiling, but inside, a knot formed. I was still the foreigner, still the woman whose skin burned too easily in the sun, still the one who didn't understand all the jokes. Later, Miguel found me sitting on the edge of the pier, my feet dangling over the water. "I don't think I belong here," I said quietly. He sat beside me, not rushing to fill the silence. Finally, he said, "Belonging isn't about where you're from. It's about where you decide to stay, even when it's hard." That night, I danced again. Not because I felt I had to, but because I wanted to. One afternoon, a letter arrived from Russia. It was from an old friend inviting me to perform in Moscow. A large concert, a chance to be on stage again under the bright lights I had once lived for. For days, I walked the beach thinking about it. I missed performing. I missed the grand pianos, the way my fingers could fill a concert hall. But I also remembered the loneliness of my apartment, the cold streets, the polite clapping that felt far away. In the end, I wrote back, "Thank you. Not this time." Because I realized I didn't need to go back to be a musician. I was already one here. On the anniversary of my arrival, Miguel and I went to the same beach where I had first stood, sandals in hand. The tide rolled in, warm and gentle. I told him, "When I came here, I thought it was for 2 weeks. But I found more than I came for. I found the sun, yes. But I also found you, and I found me." The promise I made to myself that day was simple. To keep choosing this life, even when it wasn't easy. To keep building it. One tide, one lesson, one smile at a time. If you've listened this far, maybe you're searching for something too. Maybe you're standing in your own winter, wondering if there's a different life waiting for you somewhere else. I can't tell you where that place is. But I can tell you this, the moment you decide to step toward it, the world will start opening doors you never knew existed. This is Alina from St. Petersburg to Palawan, saying thank you for sharing this journey with me. And if my story touched you, if it made you think, dream, or even just smile, then I'd love for you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join me for the next chapter of Life Under the Sun. I thought my story in the Philippines had ended. But one phone call, one trembling voice from thousands of miles away, pulled me back to the frozen streets of Russia. I promised myself I'd only stay for a while. I didn't know that leaving would test my heart, my love, and my very sense of home, and that the choice I would make next would change my life forever. If you haven't heard the first part of my story, my name is Alina. I'm a 32-year-old Russian woman from St. Petersburg. Last year, my life was a blur of cold mornings, silent metro rides, and a heart that felt empty. Everything changed when I traveled to the Philippines, to a small island called Palawan, just for a 2-week escape. But what I found there was far more than a holiday. I found Miguel, a local man with a smile warmer than the tropical sun, and a way of life so different from the rush and shadows of home. Those 2 weeks turned into months. I swam in turquoise waters, learned to cook adobo, laughed with the locals, and slowly, I fell in love. Not just with Miguel, but with myself again. But then came the call from my mother. Her voice was tired, her health was failing, and she needed me. I told Miguel I'd return soon. I boarded a plane back to Russia, not knowing that leaving would be harder than I could have imagined. The cold hit me before I even stepped outside Pulkovo Airport. That familiar bite of winter wind stung my cheeks as I pulled my scarf tighter. Snowflakes clung to my eyelashes, and the gray skyline of St. Petersburg loomed ahead. It was beautiful in its own severe way. But after months of sunlight, it felt like stepping into another lifetime. My mother was waiting in the arrivals hall. She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in layers, her eyes tired but bright when they met mine. "Alina, my girl," she said softly, pulling me into her arms. Her embrace was warm, but I could feel how thin she'd become. The days in Russia were filled with doctor visits, pharmacy runs, and hours of sitting at her kitchen table, listening to the steady tick of the old wall clock. I cooked her soup, changed her bed sheets, and made sure she took her medicine. At night, when she was asleep, I would sit by the window, my phone in my hand, staring at Miguel's last message. "Come back soon. The sea is waiting." We spoke often, but the distance between us wasn't just measured in miles. The time zones were cruel. When I woke up, he was going to sleep. When I finished cooking dinner, he was already out on the water, fishing with his friends. Still, every message, every call kept the thread between us alive. Winter in St. Petersburg has a way of seeping into your bones. The streets were white and silent, the sun a pale ghost that barely rose above the horizon. I tried to settle back into my old routines, but everything felt heavier. The cafes I used to love were too quiet. My friends' conversations seemed shallow, and whenever I closed my eyes, I saw Miguel smile, the way the sunset lit the water behind him. My mother noticed my restlessness. One evening, as we drank tea by the window, she said, "Your heart is still there, isn't it? In the islands." I hesitated. "I can't just leave you, Mama." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I raised you to follow your heart. But don't forget, I'm strong, even if I'm old." She smiled faintly. "And I have my friends, my neighbors. You have your life." It wasn't that simple. Leaving again would feel like abandoning her, but staying felt like abandoning myself. To bridge the distance, Miguel and I began sending letters. Not just texts or calls, real letters. Each envelope carried the scent of the sea and the warmth of his words. He sent photos of the beach, of the little garden we'd planted together, of the cat that had decided his porch was home. I sent him pressed flowers from my mother's windowsill, little sketches of St. Petersburg's frozen canals, and stories about my childhood. In my mind, I was building a bridge between our two worlds, plank by plank. But there were days when his letters didn't come, when the silence felt louder than the winter wind. I told myself it was just the mail, just the weather. Still, doubt crept in. Was he still waiting? In early March, as the snow began to melt, Miguel called me late one night. His voice was soft but excited. "Alina, the town is having the festival again next month. Remember last year? The dancing, the food, the lanterns. I want you to see it again. Please. Come back." I felt my heart race. I had been waiting for those words, but they terrified me. Could I leave my mother now? Could I risk stepping back into a life that might be too good to last? When I told my mother, she simply nodded. "Go," she said. "If you wait until the perfect time, you'll wait forever." For 2 weeks, I wrestled with the choice. My friends said I was crazy to consider leaving again. My own mind told me it was selfish. But every time I thought about staying, my chest felt heavy. And every time I thought about going, I felt alive. I bought the ticket on a rainy Thursday afternoon. The moment the confirmation email hit my inbox, I felt the weight in my chest lift. Flying back to the Philippines felt different this time. The first time had been an escape. This time was a return. I stared out the airplane window as the endless white of Russia gave way to the deep blue of the Pacific. My palms were sweaty, my heart pounding. Would Miguel be there at the airport? Would he still feel the same? As I stepped into the warm air of Puerto Princesa, I was hit with the scent of salt and flowers. My skin drank in the heat. And then, there he was. Miguel standing by the exit, holding a small bouquet of frangipani. His smile was exactly as I remembered. I dropped my bag and ran to him. The moment his arms closed around me, every mile, every day of waiting, dissolved. "Welcome home," he whispered. The weeks after my return were a blur of joy. We swam in the sea, cooked meals together, and took long walks through the market. The festival was just as magical as I remembered. Music filling the air, lanterns glowing like stars. One night, as we sat on the beach, watching the moon rise, Miguel took my hand. "You came back," he said softly. "That's all I ever wanted." I rested my head on his shoulder. "I'm not leaving again," I said. And for the first time in months, I knew it was true. It's been 6 months since I came back to the Philippines. Sometimes, I still wake up expecting to see the soft white glow of snow outside my window, to feel the bite of Russian winter on my cheeks. But when I open my eyes, it's sunlight that greets me, filtering through the bamboo slats of our little home in Palawan. The air smells of salt and mangoes, and the ocean is just a few steps away. Life here is slower. Miguel and I start our mornings with coffee on the porch, watching fishermen bring in their catch. I've learned their names, their stories, even a few words in their dialect. I help the women in the village with market days, carrying baskets of fish and fruit, and they've started calling me Ate Lena, Big Sister Lena. It's funny, in Russia I was always Elena the Traveler, the woman who never stayed in one place. Here, I'm simply part of something. Miguel still teases me about my first week here, when I couldn't stand the heat. Now I walk barefoot on the sand without flinching, my skin bronzed from the sun. I've learned to cook adobo the way his grandmother did, to plant sweet potatoes in the garden behind our house, and to gut a fish without looking like I'm about to faint. Some days, I write in my journal, the same one I carried with me through airports and lonely nights. I write about the laughter of children chasing kites, the sound of waves lulling me to sleep, the way Miguel's hand always finds mine when we walk. I write about peace, something I never thought I'd feel again after the war. Today marks 1 year since I came back. Miguel remembered, of course. He woke me before sunrise and led me to the cliff overlooking the sea. The sky was painted in gold and pink, the ocean calm as glass. We sat there, wrapped in a blanket, sipping coffee from a shared mug. "I still remember the first time I saw you here," he said, his voice low. "I thought you were just passing through. I never thought you'd stay." I laughed. "Neither did I." He looked at me, and there was that same spark in his eyes, the one that first made me feel like I was home. "You know," he said, "we should plant more trees, build a bigger porch, maybe make room for a family someday." My heart swelled. I didn't need a ring or grand declarations. Those words were enough. We spent the rest of the day celebrating in the village. There was music, grilled fish, and dancing under strings of lanterns. An old fisherman told me, "You belong here now, Elena." And for the first time in my life, I believed it completely. That night, as Miguel and I stood on the beach watching fireworks bloom in the dark, I thought about everything it took to get here. The fear, the uncertainty, the distance. And I knew, without a shadow of doubt, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. I came to the Philippines to escape the echoes of war. I stayed because I found something far more powerful than fear. I found love, belonging, and a future worth holding on to. And if you've followed my journey this far, I want to say thank you. Your support, your time, it means more than you know. And if you believe in second chances, in finding home in the most unexpected places, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story. Because maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to hear that it's never too late to start again. The waves still whispered the same song, but something in the air had changed. After everything Miguel and I had been through, I thought we had found our rhythm again. Days in Palawan felt warm and familiar. The laughter of the market, the scent of grilled fish in the afternoons, the sunsets that painted the water gold. But lately, I had begun to notice little things. A glance that lingered too long, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a silence where there used to be words. I didn't know it then, but those small moments were leading me to a truth I wasn't ready to face. The morning light in Palawan has a way of touching everything like it's in love. It slips through the bamboo blinds in my small seaside home, paints the floor with soft gold, and makes the air feel almost tender. I was still half asleep when the scent of coffee drifted into the bedroom. That was always Miguel's ritual. He claimed he couldn't think straight without making coffee first thing, as if the warmth in his cup was the key to starting the day right. I walked into the kitchen barefoot, the cool tiles greeting my toes. There he was, back to me, humming something low and familiar, wearing that old white shirt I loved, the one that had gone thin at the shoulders from too many washes. "Morning, Princesa," he said, glancing over his shoulder with a quick smile. His voice was warm, but I don't know. Something in the way his eyes didn't hold mine felt different. It was like the smile was there, but the part of him that meant it was somewhere else. I brushed the thought away. Not every morning had to be perfect. We talked about the tide, the weather, the neighbor's dog that kept sneaking into our garden. Simple, safe topics. I didn't notice until later that he never asked me how I'd slept. The day unfolded like the ones we'd promised ourselves when I first moved here for good. The sun was warm, but not cruel. The air salty and sweet. The waves slow and lazy. Miguel had the day off from the resort, so we decided to walk to the little fishing pier at the edge of town. He made me laugh. He always did. Some joke about the fisherman who swore he'd seen a mermaid last week and how he'd charge tourists for sightings if he could. Then, in the middle of telling me about a new cafe by the marina, he slipped. "We had the most amazing mango tart," he said, grinning like a boy remembering his first crush. "We?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, I went there, with some friends from work." His hand went to the back of his neck, rubbing like he was smoothing the moment over. He moved on quickly, but my mind stayed on that "we" for the rest of the afternoon. It was nothing, I told myself. Just a word. People mix up words all the time. But that night, lying in bed, I replayed it in my head. His face when he corrected himself, the way his tone softened when he first said it. I hadn't spoken to Mama in a few days, so I called her while Miguel was out getting groceries. She was sitting by the kitchen window in Moscow, the winter light pale and sharp behind her. Even through the screen, I could see how the years had softened her but not dimmed her. "My Alina," she said, her voice warm. "You look tired." "I'm fine, Mama," I smiled. She tilted her head, the way she always did when she was deciding whether to believe me. "Fine? You don't sound fine. How is Miguel? How is your heart?" I laughed lightly, trying to hide the small knot inside me. "Everything is okay. Life is beautiful here." "Beautiful is not the same as happy," she said softly. I froze for a second. She had always been able to read me, even from thousands of kilometers away. "I'm happy," I said again, but my voice sounded smaller than I intended. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me, but she let it go. Instead, she told me about her garden, about the cat that kept sleeping on her balcony, about the first snow. When we hung up, the apartment felt heavier, and I realized that lately, the only time I felt completely steady was when I was talking to her. It was late afternoon when the first shadow touched my peace. The sun had begun its slow dive toward the horizon, and Miguel came home with the sea breeze still clinging to him. I was folding laundry by the open window, the sound of waves filling the room. He bent to kiss my cheek, and that's when I noticed it. The faintest trace of perfume, sharp and floral, not the warm sandalwood he usually wore, and not mine. "You smell different," I said lightly, more curious than suspicious. "Oh, maybe from the shop. They were giving out samples." His answer came quickly, almost too quickly, before he disappeared into the shower. I stood there with a folded shirt in my hands, listening to the water run. It was nothing, I told myself, just a detail. But it joined the small knot in my chest, the one that had been growing since that "we" at the pier. Days in Palawan have a way of moving forward, no matter what thoughts you carry. Fishermen still call out to each other in the early light. Children still chase each other barefoot on the beach, and the tide still breathes in and out like it has for centuries. Miguel and I still shared coffee in the mornings, still talked about the neighbors' gossip, still strolled through the market on Saturdays. But I found myself paying more attention to the pauses, the moments when his eyes drifted elsewhere mid-conversation, or when his phone lit up and he tilted it away before unlocking it. And yet, the island wrapped me in beauty. The mango trees bowed heavy with fruit, and the air at sunset turned the world gold. Sometimes I convinced myself that beauty was enough. One Sunday, Miguel suggested lunch by the marina. The cafe he'd once mentioned, the one with the mango tart, had just reopened. We sat by the water, the scent of grilled fish mingling with the salt air. A waitress brought our order, and as she set it down, I caught a glance from another table. A woman, foreign, maybe Eastern European, watching Miguel with a soft familiarity. He didn't notice her, or maybe he pretended not to. She smiled faintly before looking away, and the moment passed like a wave breaking quietly on the shore. But I felt it. The unspoken recognition between strangers who aren't truly strangers. That night, I called Mama. She was bundled in her wool sweater, the snow visible through her kitchen window in Moscow. "My Alina," she said, "you sound far away tonight." I told her about the market, about the marina, about the stars over the water. I didn't tell her about the perfume or the woman's glance, but she told me a story about my father years ago and a time she'd chosen to ignore the signs. "We think love means closing our eyes," she said, "but sometimes love means opening them, even if it hurts." Her words sat heavy in me, but I thanked her and promised I was fine. She didn't believe me. She never did when I lied. It happened by accident. Miguel left his phone on the counter while he stepped out to greet a neighbor. A message flashed across the screen. A photo of the woman from the marina standing on a pier at sunset. The caption was in Ukrainian. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. The image burned itself into my mind before he came back inside. That evening, we ate in near silence. The grilled fish was perfect, the rice warm and soft, but every bite felt heavy. Miguel talked about the resort's plans for expansion, about the tourist season starting soon. I nodded, smiled, even laughed when appropriate, but inside, I was listening for the truth beneath his words and hearing nothing but echoes. The sunset outside our window was breathtaking, streaked with rose and gold. We didn't go out to watch it together. I waited until morning, until the light was soft and there were no shadows to hide in. "Miguel," I began, my voice steady. "Who is she?" His fork froze halfway to his mouth. He didn't ask who I meant. He set it down, leaned back, and let out a long breath. "She's someone I met when you went back to Russia. It shouldn't have happened." The words were heavy, but calm, as if he'd rehearsed them. He told me about long shifts at the resort, about feeling lonely, about how she reminded him of something he couldn't name. I listened. I didn't cry. The tears had already been building for weeks. I was too tired to let them out now. I walked alone along the shore that night, the moonlight silvering the waves. Somewhere in the darkness, the fishermen's boats bobbed gently, their lanterns swaying. I thought of Mama, of her hands, worn but gentle, of her voice warning me not to close my eyes. And I thought of myself, the girl who had left Moscow to chase the light here, only to find shadows waiting. In the morning, I told Miguel I forgave him, not because what he did was small. It wasn't. But because carrying anger felt heavier than letting it go. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't for him. It was for me, so I could walk forward without his choices tied to my ankles. He cried. I didn't. Miguel moved out quietly, and I stayed. The sea was still mine, the morning still golden, the mango trees still bowing under their sweet weight. I began to take long walks at dawn, barefoot in the cool sand, the horizon stretching wide before me. I was single, yes, but I was whole. And in the slow rhythm of the waves, I began to hear my own heart again.
My name is Katarina. I'm 32 years old, and before the war, I lived in a small but beautiful city in Ukraine called Chernihiv. Life there is not easy, but it has a rhythm. Every morning, I walk past the old cathedral to get to my job at a little bakery. I love the smell of fresh bread. I love watching the first customers of the day shuffle in, sleepy-eyed, holding a few coins in their hands. I live with my mother in a modest 2-room apartment. She's been sick for a few years now, and I'm her only caregiver. We live simply: bread, potatoes, cabbage, sometimes chicken if we're lucky. I never think of leaving Ukraine. My friends talk about working abroad, but I tell them, my home is here, my mother is here, my life is here. That's how I feel. until the night everything changes. It's February. The news on the radio is tense. There are rumors of an invasion. People whisper about it in line at the market. I don't believe it at first. But then, it happens. Air raid sirens scream in the middle of the night. The sound is so loud it feels like it's inside my bones. The ground shakes, windows rattle. I run to my mother's room. She's already crying, clutching the photo of my father. Days blur together in chaos. Bombs, power outages, empty shelves in stores. The bakery closes. I stay home, listening for every sound, every plane, every explosion. Our neighbor's apartment is hit. After that, I know we have to leave. My mother is too weak to travel far, but I can't stay here and wait for death. The hardest decision of my life is leaving her behind in the care of my aunt. She tells me, "Go, Katya, live." I kiss her hands and promise to call her every day. I carry only a small bag, some clothes, my passport, and a few photos. I travel west by bus, then cross into Poland. Refugee centers are overcrowded, filled with tired, scared faces. Aid workers give us blankets, bread, and hot tea. I spend a month there, moving from shelter to shelter. People talk about going to Germany, Canada, America. I hear about the Philippines from a volunteer. She says, "It's far, but peaceful. They are friendly to Ukrainians right now." The Philippines? I barely know where it is, but when you have no home, no job, and no safe place, you start considering anything. A church group offers to sponsor my flight. They say they have a community in Davao where I can stay, where God's children live in harmony. It sounds like salvation. When I arrive in Davao, it's warm, humid, and strange. Palm trees instead of snow. The air smells like the sea. A group of people from the church greet me at the airport, smiling warmly. They take me to a large compound surrounded by tall fences. At first, I think it's for safety. Later, I understand it's for control. Life there is strict. Every day starts with prayers at 5 a.m. We work in the fields, cook, clean. Phones are taken away for focus. The leader, a man in his 60s, calls himself Tatay, meaning father. He preaches about purity, sacrifice, and loyalty. He says God brought me here to serve the mission. At first, I believe he's a holy man, but soon I see his other face. Women are called to his private quarters late at night. Some return silent, others crying. If someone refuses, they are shamed in front of the group. My turn comes one evening. He tells me God has chosen me for special service. His words are gentle, but his eyes are cold. I freeze. I think of my mother. I think of the war. I think of how far I am from anyone who can help me. I want to scream, but I know that will only make things worse. That night, I pray harder than I've ever prayed in my life. Days turn into weeks. I pretend to obey, but inside I'm planning my escape. I befriend a younger woman named Liza, who whispers to me that she knows a guard who can be bribed. We save scraps of food and coins we find while cleaning. The guard agrees to leave the back gate unlocked for a few minutes at midnight. When the night comes, my heart is pounding so hard I can barely hear. We slip out quietly, barefoot, carrying nothing but fear. We run down a dirt road until my legs feel like they will break. In the distance, I see the lights of the city. We make it to a police station. At first, they don't believe us. But after hours of questions, an officer finally says, "You're safe now." I'm sent to a shelter for women. It's small and crowded, but no one is trying to control me. I can breathe again. From there, I find work washing dishes at a small restaurant. It's tiring, but the pay is enough to rent a tiny room. My first night alone, I sit on the floor, holding my bag, and cry. Not because I'm sad, but because I'm free. The first week at the restaurant felt like I had stepped into another life entirely. I traded the stifling air of the religious compound for the clatter of plates, the hum of conversations, and the constant rhythmic sound of the kitchen door swinging open and shut. That's when I first noticed him. He wasn't the type to demand attention. In fact, that was the problem. He seemed determined to avoid it. Tall, with an easy smile that appeared only in quick flashes, he worked behind the bar like a man who had learned to keep his distance from the world. At first, I thought he didn't like me. He spoke to everyone else easily, but with me, his words were clipped, careful. Our conversations were brief, just orders and instructions, nothing more. But then there were those moments. I'd catch him looking when he thought I wasn't paying attention. A slow glance, quickly averted, the kind of look that lingered just a second too long to be accidental. One afternoon, while I was taking drinks to a table, he brushed past me in the narrow aisle. The touch was accidental, or at least it was supposed to be, but there was something in the way his hand grazed mine that made my pulse trip. He was careful, though. Too careful. There were times I'd try to start a casual conversation, maybe tease him about how serious he always looked when polishing glasses. He'd smirk, maybe give me a short reply, and then change the subject entirely. It was almost like he was afraid of something. Then one evening, while we were closing, I found myself alone with him in the dimly lit restaurant. The sound of rain outside muffled everything else. I joked about how I still couldn't pronounce half the dishes on the menu without stumbling over the words. He laughed, really laughed this time, and for a moment, the wall between us cracked. But just as quickly, he stepped back. His voice softened, almost guarded. "You're doing fine," he said. "Better than you think." I wanted to ask him why he kept pulling away, but I didn't. There was a sadness in his eyes, something that told me his heart was still tangled up somewhere else. Still. Every time our hands brushed when exchanging a plate, every fleeting glance we shared, every smile that seemed like it was not meant to happen, those moments told me something unspoken was there. I didn't know if I was ready to chase it. I didn't know if he was ready to let it happen. But I knew this. Whatever it was between us, it was growing. Slowly. Sweetly. Like a fire that hadn't yet decided whether it wanted to burn. It began with small, harmless things. Late-night texts about the shift, then about our favorite songs, then about dreams we were too shy to admit in person. He'd sometimes send a joke in the middle of the day, and I'd laugh so loudly in my little rented room that my neighbors probably thought I was crazy. We met outside work a few times, in quiet places where no one knew us. Coffee by the harbor, a walk under the dim orange glow of streetlights. Those moments felt like stolen sunlight. And yet, in every smile I could sense a shadow, as if a part of him was somewhere else, with someone else. I didn't press. I was too afraid the truth would end it. One rainy afternoon, everything changed. A new customer walked in, her presence lighting up the dim restaurant like a sudden spark. She was beautiful in that effortless, magnetic way, the kind that draws every eye without trying. I went to take her order, but before I could speak, Miguel appeared beside me. The air between them shifted instantly. His voice cracked when he said her name. She smiled at him, a smile of someone who has history, who has been missed. And in that moment, I knew. This was her. The one who lived in the shadow of his every glance. The one he thought was gone. The one he loved before me. He had once told me in a text that sometimes the past feels like a ghost, always there, even if you pretend it isn't. Now, that ghost was flesh and blood, standing before us. My heart tightened, but I managed a polite smile. I took her order, my hands steady, even though my chest felt like it was splintering. I didn't need him to explain. I already understood. We could keep pretending for a while, maybe even keep our secret meetings. But in the end, we both knew. She was back. And no matter how much he cared for me, she was his true love. And the cruelest part? I couldn't even hate her. If this is your first time hearing my story, let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Katarina. I was born in a small town in Ukraine, where winters were long and dreams felt even longer. I never imagined that one day I would find myself thousands of kilometers away, in the warm and chaotic beauty of the Philippines. I came here with nothing but a suitcase, a broken heart, and a hope for a fresh start. That's when I met Miguel, the man whose smile could melt away my fears. He was kind, patient, and saw me not as a foreigner, but as a woman who deserved love and a second chance. But life in the Philippines was never a fairy tale, especially when I met Alina, another woman who knew Miguel in ways I didn't expect. Our story became tangled with misunderstandings, quiet rivalries, and moments we wished we could take back. Yet somehow, even through the jealousy, the silence, and the tears, our lives kept colliding. And now, after everything we've been through, it's time for the final chapter. The part where Miguel must choose between us. But fate has other plans. This isn't just a love story. It's a story about forgiveness, friendship, and the strange way life can break your heart, only to put it back together in a way you never imagined. I still remember the exact sound of the door opening that night. A creak that sliced through the quiet like a knife. It was late. The kind of late where the crickets outside are loud enough to drown out the occasional hum of a distant tricycle. I had been sitting with Miguel in his small apartment, talking in low voices, the kind of conversation that dances between laughter and silence. He was holding my hand, looking at me like I was the only person in the room. And then I heard her voice. Katarina. It was Alina. Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made my stomach twist. I froze. Miguel's grip loosened, his eyes darting to the door. She stood there, framed in the dim light, wearing a simple white blouse and jeans. Her hair was slightly damp, like she'd just come from the rain outside. But it was her eyes that hit me. Not wide with surprise, but calm. Too calm. For a second, no one moved. The air was thick with unspoken things. Miguel, she said, I think you forgot to tell me something. My heart pounded so hard I was sure they could hear it. I opened my mouth, but no words came. I didn't even know what I could say. Miguel stood slowly like he was walking on glass. Alina, it's not... Don't lie, she cut in, her voice trembling but firm. I'm not here to fight. I just want the truth. I could feel heat rising in my chest. This wasn't how I had wanted things to be. I had told myself 100 times that I'd talk to her before anything got too deep with Miguel. But somehow the days kept slipping by. And the more time I spent with him, the harder it was to pull away. Alina, I finally spoke. I didn't mean for this to happen. She let out a bitter laugh, not cruel, just tired. You didn't mean for this to happen? Katarina, you know what he means to me. Miguel's voice broke in, sharper now. Alina, I love you, but I also... He stopped himself, rubbing the back of his neck like he could physically wipe away the words. I wanted to disappear. The three of us stood there in a small triangle of tension, the ceiling fan spinning slowly above us. Finally, Alina stepped closer, her eyes fixed on me. Do you love him? My throat tightened. I nodded barely. She turned to Miguel. And you? Who do you choose? He opened his mouth, but no sound came. He looked at her, then at me, then back at her again. His lips trembled. I can't answer that right now. It was the worst answer he could have given. That night didn't end in shouting. It ended in a strange, cold peace. Alina and I sat on opposite sides of Miguel's small sala, both staring at the floor. He brought us tea, like it would somehow help. but the steam only made the silence heavier. Finally, she said, "I forgive you, both of you." I looked up, surprised. She was serious. Her eyes were wet, but she smiled faintly. "Life is too short to carry this forever, but we won't see each other for a while." I nodded. It was a truce, not friendship, not closeness, but the absence of war. And so, for months, we didn't speak. It was a Tuesday when the news came. I was at the market, choosing mangoes, when my phone rang. It was Alina. We hadn't spoken in almost half a year. Her voice was shaking. "Katarina, it's Miguel. He's been in an accident." The world seemed to tilt. I don't remember the jeepney ride to the hospital, just the smell of gasoline and the blur of raindrops on the window. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting in the hallway outside the emergency room. Her face was pale, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. The doctor came out, eyes down. "I'm sorry, he didn't make it." Everything after that was a haze. The wailing of his mother, the murmurs of the nurses, the slow realization that I would never hear his voice again. The small provincial church was packed. Miguel had been the kind of person who made friends everywhere. The barber, the tricycle drivers, the vendors at the market. Alina and I sat in the front row, side by side, both wearing black. We didn't speak, but somehow our shoulders touched, and we didn't pull away. During the service, I glanced at her. She was crying silently, a tear slipping down her cheek every few seconds. Without thinking, I reached over and took her hand. She didn't resist. In that moment, I realized we weren't enemies. We were just two women who had loved the same man, and now, both of us had lost him. After the burial, we sat under the shade of a mango tree near the cemetery. The air was heavy with the smell of wet earth. "I hated you for a while," Alina said softly, not looking at me. "I know," I replied. "I hated myself too." She turned to me then, and for the first time in months she smiled. "But I think Miguel wouldn't want us to keep hating. He loved us both, in his own flawed, messy way." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "Maybe we can be friends?" She laughed gently. "Maybe we already are." The months after were slow, healing months. Alina and I started seeing each other often. Coffee at the plaza, visits to Miguel's mother, helping with community events. We talked about him a lot, but also about life. She told me stories of her childhood in Ukraine. I told her about my family back home, and sometimes, when the sun set over the rice fields and the sky turned gold, we'd sit in silence, knowing that somewhere, somehow, Miguel was watching, not choosing between us, not dividing his love, but smiling because we had chosen peace. People think love stories always end with a kiss, or a wedding, or some grand declaration. But sometimes, love's ending is quiet. It's two people sharing the same loss, and deciding that it's better to hold each other up than to push each other down. I loved Miguel. Alina loved Miguel. And in losing him, we found something neither of us expected: each other. And that is how we both won.